In Andersen Air Force Base, Guam, a grounded fighter pilot was about to defy the most sacred rule of command. What started as routine storm preparation took a shocking turn when she came face to face with a desperate SOS tapped from beneath the ocean floor. Captain Riley Stanton wasn't your typical instructor pilot. For 12 years, she had lived her life in the sky. A combat-proven F-16 driver known for listening to instincts that saved lives, even when orders said otherwise. When she encountered the rhythmic taps of trapped seals breaking through a typhoon's roar, she had no idea she was walking into a choice that would shatter every regulation she'd sworn to uphold. Stanton answered the call that would lead to a high-stakes rescue, a military scandal, and a reckoning with the very system she'd once defended. What began as a storm lockdown would become a mission that rewrote the rules of duty and conscience. The Pacific Command and every airbase that heard her transmission would never be the same after one pilot refused to stop listening. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wind screamed at 90 knots when I first heard the pattern that would cost me everything. Super Typhoon Liza was dragging her tail across Guam, and Andersen Air Force Base looked like a scene from some disaster movie nobody wanted to watch. November 2026, and we were buttoning up the flight line in conditions that made conversation impossible without shouting directly into someone's ear. Master Sergeant Rowena Delgado, we all called her Ro, worked beside me, her weathered hands moving with the muscle memory of 30 years on the ramp. "Last panel," she yelled over the shriek of wind, gesturing toward an F-16 that had been grounded for a hydraulic issue. "Then we're done, Captain." Captain. The rank still felt like it carried an asterisk. Decorated Viper driver? Yes. Combat proven? Absolutely. But also the pilot who once refused to strike because the collateral damage modeling looked wrong. I'd been right. The intel was flawed, civilians were exactly where I'd predicted, but being right doesn't always save your career. It just chills it. Slows your trajectory, turns you into an instructor pilot instead of a squadron commander. I didn't regret it, but I felt the weight of it every day. We secured the panel, and Ro gave me that look she always did when the brass wasn't watching. Protective, almost maternal. "You good, Riley?" "Always good." Which was pilot speak for, "I'm functional." The base had gone to condition of readiness 2 hours earlier. Essential personnel only. Most people were hunkered in reinforced structures, waiting for Liza to finish her tantrum. But fighters don't secure themselves, and Ro wasn't the type to let someone else do her job. We jogged toward the side hangar, the one usually reserved for sensor calibration and maintenance testing. The door fought us, then surrendered with a metal groan. Inside, the noise dropped from unbearable to merely oppressive. 3 junior airmen were running checks on hydrophone equipment, standard storm protocol, making sure our underwater listening arrays survived the beating they were taking from Liza's surge. That's when the lights flickered. Not dramatically, just a brief brownout, the kind you get when the grid takes a hit. Somewhere beneath us, tectonic plates were settling after a minor earthquake. We had felt tremors before. This was Guam, perched on the Pacific Ring of Fire like a sentry that couldn't quite stand still. I pulled off my soaked cap and wiped rain from my face. My ears were ringing. They always were. Tinnitus, courtesy of a high-G ejection 3 years back when a hydraulic line decided to become a fountain at 15,000 feet. The constant hum had become my companion, a reminder that I'd survived something that should have killed me. But underneath that familiar ring, I heard something else. The hydrophone test feed was playing through a small speaker near the workstation. Mostly it was the chaos you'd expect. Wind-driven surface chop, structural groans, the white noise of a storm beating the ocean into submission. But there, buried in the static, tap, 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 tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. My engineer's brain, the part that had kept me alive through 12 combat deployments, started processing patterns. 5 beats, 3 beats, repeating. Not random. Not environmental. Deliberate. "Hey!" I called to the nearest airman, a young woman with sensor tech patches on her sleeve. "That feed, is that live?" She glanced up from her checklist. "Yes, ma'am. Hydrophone array 7, near the old sub-pen." The old sub-pen. Decommissioned 6 years ago when the Navy consolidated operations. Now it was just a concrete shell, a relic from a different era of Pacific strategy. I'd heard rumors they were planning to demo it, collapse it properly before it became a hazard. But that was distant future planning. Infrastructure moved slowly. "Can you isolate that audio? Clean it up?" The airman, her name tape read Park, looked uncertain. "Ma'am, it's just storm interference. We're supposed to be checking signal integrity, not—" "Airman Park." I kept my voice level, but I let the captain's bars do their work. "I'm asking you to isolate and enhance that segment. 30 seconds of your time." She exchanged a glance with her colleagues, then pulled up the audio processing interface. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. The software stripped away layers of noise, applied filters, brought the pattern into sharper relief. 5 beats, 3 beats, 5 beats, 3 beats. My mouth went dry. I'd learned tap code in survival school, the same place every combat pilot learns it. It's a relic from POW camps, a simple 5x5 grid that lets you spell out messages with nothing but rhythm. 5 beats followed by 3 beats in the standard grid meant one thing: S-E-A-L-S. Then the pattern shifted slightly. 5 beats, 4 beats. H-E-L-P. "Jesus," I whispered. Park looked at me, confused. "Ma'am?" Before I could answer, the hangar door banged open. A chief petty officer from the operations center stuck his head in, rain streaming off his cover. "Delgado, Stanton, Skipper wants all non-essential personnel in the shelters. Storm's intensifying. You're done here." Rowe nodded. "Copy that, Chief." I grabbed Park's shoulder. "Save that audio. Right now. Whatever you have to do, dump it to a drive, email it to yourself, I don't care, but don't let it disappear into some filtered dashboard where nobody will ever listen to it again." Park's eyes widened. She understood I was asking her to bend protocol, maybe break it. "June," I'd read her full name off her badge. "I flew combat over Syria. I know the sound of someone asking for help. If I'm wrong, you can write me up tomorrow. But if I'm right, and we ignore this because of procedure—" I let the sentence hang. She swallowed hard, then gave a tiny nod. Her hand moved to her pocket, pulling out a small thumb drive. While her colleagues were distracted by the chief's entrance, she plugged it in and started a copy. Rowe was watching me with that expression that meant I knew I was about to do something that wouldn't appear in any official manual. "Riley, what's going on?" "Maybe nothing. Maybe I'm hearing ghosts." But I didn't believe that. The tinnitus had taught me something. Sometimes the signals everyone else filters out are the ones that matter most. Sometimes being broken in just the right way makes you the only sensor that works. We filed out of the hangar and made our way to the nearest shelter. The wind had picked up even more, if that was possible, turning rain into horizontal needles. Inside the reinforced structure, about 40 people had gathered, maintainers, support staff, a few pilots who'd been caught on base when the storm locked down operations. I found a corner and tried to look casual while my mind raced. The old subpen had been built into the natural rock formations along the base's eastern edge, taking advantage of lava tube caverns that offered protection and concealment. When they decommissioned it, they'd sealed the main entrances but left the underground structure largely intact. Too expensive to fully demo, and it wasn't hurting anyone just sitting there. But those caverns connected to the ocean. And if the quake had opened new channels, if flooding was happening in patterns that matched tidal cycles, my phone buzzed. A message from a number I didn't recognize. Saved it. JP. June Park. She'd come through. I needed to talk to someone who actually understood the geology, someone who had warned the base about exactly this kind of scenario. I pulled up the base directory and searched for Dr. Kehi Nakoa. The base housing unit I'd been assigned was a single-story concrete box that had all the charm of a storage locker but at least didn't leak. Yet, I sat at my kitchen table at 0200 hours while Lisa threw everything she had at my windows, and I listened to 30 seconds of audio for the 100th time. The tap pattern was clearer now, isolated from the storm noise. I'd loaded June Park's file onto my laptop and spent the last 3 hours teaching myself to be a better analyst than I'd ever been trained to be. 5-3, 5-4, pause, 4-4, 5-5, 3-5. I'd written it all out on graph paper, old school, plotting the intervals between taps. The pattern repeated every 90 seconds, which meant whoever was sending it had established a rhythm they could maintain. That suggested organization, discipline, training. SEALs asking for help. Then, if I'm reading the subsequent patterns right, water rising, multiple injured. But it was the next part that made my hands shake. 381. 381 people. I sat back in my chair and stared at that number. A joint training exercise had been scheduled for this week. Navy Special Warfare units, some foreign observers, experimental equipment testing, the kind of multinational, multi-purpose operation that the Pacific Fleet loved to showcase. But when Lisa's track had shifted, they'd called it off. Or they thought they had. What if the storm had come up faster than expected? What if personnel had been in the tunnels when the quake hit? What if the normal evacuation protocols had failed because nobody expected the caverns to flood? I pulled up every news brief and status report I could access on my secure tablet. Nothing. No distress calls. No missing persons reports. Just routine storm updates and a single administrative note that made my blood run cold. Demolition contingency activated for Anderson Subpen Complex. Structural integrity compromised. Authorization pending for controlled collapse to neutralize unsecured munitions. Controlled collapse. They were going to bring the tunnels down. And if anyone was alive in those air pockets, they'd be buried forever. I grabbed my phone and searched for Kehi and Nakoa's contact information. He was a civilian volcanologist who'd been hired as a consultant years ago, back when they were still figuring out how to safely use the lava tubes. I'd met him once at a base safety brief. He'd been the guy everyone had politely ignored while he explained cave acoustics and collapse risks. His number rang 4 times. I thought I'd get voicemail, but then a tired voice answered. "This is Kehi." "Dr. Nakoa, this is Captain Riley Stanton, Anderson Air Force Base. I'm sorry to call at this hour, but I'm awake," he said. "Hard to sleep when you know the ground is about to do something stupid. What can I do for you, Captain?" I appreciated that he didn't waste time. "The old subpen, the lava tubes underneath? If the quake opened new channels and tidal flooding is happening,
Could people survive in air pockets? There was a pause. Theoretically, yes. The tubes have sections that rise above the water table. But the tidal cycles would create pressure differentials, cavitation. Each surge would compress the air, make it harder to breathe. They'd have maybe, he trailed off, calculating, 12 to 14 hours. Less if they're injured or in shock. How would we know for sure? Acoustics, Cahey said immediately. Sound travels incredibly well through water and rock. If they're tapping on metal pipes, making noise against the tunnel walls, it would propagate through the hydrophone arrays. But the signal would be buried under storm noise unless someone specifically filtered for it. Someone did, I said. I have 30 seconds of audio. Tap code, clear patterns, and Dr. Nakoa, they're claiming 381 people are down there. The silence on the other end lasted 5 heartbeats. Send me the file, he said finally, right now. I transferred it while we stayed on the line. I heard him playing it back, muttering to himself in what sounded like Hawaiian, then English, then something that might have been equations. Captain Stanton, this is real. The harmonics, the propagation patterns, this isn't random. And if they're organized enough to send structured messages, they have leadership down there. Someone's running an oxygen discipline protocol. Can you tell where they are? Give me an hour. I need to overlay this with the tidal surge data and the old tunnel maps. But yes, I can triangulate probable locations. He hesitated. Have you reported this up the chain of command? Not yet. Do it now. Because if I'm reading the engineering reports correctly, they're planning to demo those tunnels at high tide tomorrow, 0800 local. That gives us less than 6 hours. I thanked him and hung up. Then I stared at my phone, knowing that what I did next would define everything that followed. I pulled up the emergency SAR request form on my tablet and started typing. I laid out the evidence, the hydrophone audio, the tap code translation, Cahey's preliminary analysis. I requested immediate search and rescue asset deployment, divers, sonar mapping, medical standby. I submitted it at 0314 hours. The rejection came back at 0347. Request denied. Weather prohibits SAR operations. Structural integrity concerns preclude tunnel access. Demolition proceeds as scheduled per SecDef authorization. Munitions contamination risk unacceptable. No mention of the audio. No acknowledgement of possible survivors. Just bureaucratic language that sounded like it had been written by someone who'd never looked another human being in the eye. I tried to breathe normally. My tinnitus was screaming, a high-pitched whine that matched the rage building in my chest. This was what institutions did. They optimized for certainty, for clean solutions, for avoiding the messy complications of hope and moral ambiguity. But I'd learned something in my career. Sometimes the system's sensors are calibrated wrong. Sometimes they filter out exactly what they need to see. My phone rang. Admiral Leela Osai's office. I answered, snapping to attention even though she couldn't see me. Captain Stanton. Stand down, Captain, she said. Her voice was firm but not unkind. I saw your SAR request. I know what you think you heard, but we have standing orders from Washington. There are considerations here that go beyond what you're seeing. Admiral, with respect, I'm not seeing anything, I'm hearing it. Tap code, clear patterns, and Dr. Nakoa, they're claiming 381 people are down there. Captain Stanton. She cut me off, and now there was steel in her tone. I flew surface warfare for 20 years. I know the weight of command decisions. I also know what happens when hope overrides judgment. I lost people once because I authorized a rescue that turned into a massacre. I will not make that mistake again. This isn't you are grounded by weather. You are not assigned to SAR operations. You will stand down and let the experts handle this. That's an order. Acknowledge. I closed my eyes, saw 381 faces I'd never met, heard the tap code echoing in my broken ears. Acknowledged, ma'am. Good. Get some rest, Captain. The storm will pass. She hung up. I sat in the dark, listening to the wind, and made my decision. The flight line at 04:30 a.m. was a ghost town made of screaming metal and rain. I walked with my collar up and my cap pulled low, carrying a weatherproof bag that officially contained emergency gear. Unofficially, it contained everything I needed to commit the most spectacular act of insubordination in recent Air Force history.
3 F-16s sat in various states of preservation. 2 were parts donors, cannibalized for components to keep the active fleet flying. But the third, tail number 900748, was a 2-seat F-16B that had been grounded for avionics upgrades that kept getting delayed by budget realities. She was cold, but she was complete. "You're really doing this?" I spun around. Captain Armen Petrov stood near a tool cart, his Bulgarian accent softened by 4 years of exchange training. He looked tired, amused, and somehow unsurprised. "Armen, I didn't expect to find me here?" He walked closer, keeping his voice low. "I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about that hydrophone audio everyone's pretending doesn't exist." He nodded toward the F-16B. "You need a cold start checklist that doesn't require a full crew." I should have ordered him to leave. Should have protected him from what was about to happen. Instead, I said, "Yes." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "MiG-29s, we have similar problem. Limited ground support in field conditions. There are creative solutions." He handed me the checklist. "Sequence is important. Skip steps at your risk." I took it. "Armen, if this goes wrong..." Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Then I was never here, and you never saw this paper." He smiled slightly. "But Captain Stanton, if you are right about what you heard, 381 people don't care about the regulations. They care about someone listening." He left through the same door I'd entered. I approached the F-16B like a supplicant approaching an altar, ran my hand along her nose and felt the cold metal, the promise of violence and precision she represented. I'd flown jets like her into combat, trusted my life to that perfect marriage of thrust and lift and human will. Now I'd trust her with something more important than my life. The access panels Roe had accidentally left loosened came off easily. I started Armen's checklist, working methodically. Battery cart connection, ground power unit positioned, fuel system purge sequence initiated. Each step was a small betrayal, a tiny theft of resources that belonged to the United States Air Force and not to one rogue captain with tinnitus and a savior complex. But I kept hearing the taps. 5-3, 5-4. By 0520, I had the bird powered and the systems coming online. The avionics booted with their familiar hum, displays glowing soft green in the cockpit. I loaded my gear. Sonobuoys pulled from a SAR locker, chemical glow sticks for marking, and a civilian action camera I'd taped to my glove, and a handwritten emergency frequency card for a legacy radio band that nobody used anymore. The maintenance log sat on Roe's cart, conveniently open to the right page. I wrote, 0530, functional check flight, hydraulic system validation, expected RTB 0620, Stanton, R. It would buy me maybe 30 minutes before anyone noticed I wasn't running a check flight. I wasn't even supposed to be flying. But the log would show official-looking words, and in a crisis, people trusted official-looking things. I climbed into the cockpit, strapped in, started the pre-flight by muscle memory, each switch and dial and circuit breaker a familiar prayer. Then I heard boots on concrete. Roe Delgado stood at the hangar entrance, silhouetted against the storm. She walked toward the jet slowly, deliberately, and for a moment I thought she'd come to stop me, to save me from myself. Instead, she climbed the ladder, leaned in close, and said, "You remember what you told me 3 years ago, when you refused that strike?" I nodded. "You said, 'The math is wrong, Roe. The math is telling me to kill people who don't need to die.' And you were right. The math is wrong again, but this time it's telling you to ignore people who need to live. Ro, this is going to cost you. They'll know you helped. Then they'll know. She squeezed once, then pulled back. Tow bars already removed. GPU's got 90 minutes of charge. And Riley, you bring them home. All of them. That's how you make this worth it. She descended and walked to the hangar controls. The massive doors began their slow grind open, revealing a sky that was slightly less black than it had been an hour ago. Lysa's tail was passing, leaving exhaustion in her wake. I completed the engine start sequence. The F-110 turbofan spooled up with that rising shriek that every fighter pilot feels in their bones. The jet came alive beneath me, eager, ready, indifferent to the fact that what we were about to do was completely illegal. I taxied out onto the rain-slicked ramp. Tower should have challenged me immediately, but the tower was running skeleton crew, focused on the storm, and a single F-16 squawking a maintenance code probably looked routine enough to ignore for 60 seconds. 60 seconds was all I needed. I released brakes, pushed throttle, and felt the Viper surge forward. Rotation speed came fast, 120 knots, 140, 160, and then I pulled back and the wheels left Anderson's runway. The storm grabbed me immediately, turbulence slamming me left and right. I climbed through it, fighting for every foot of altitude, until I punched through the worst of the cloud deck at 8,000 feet. Below me, invisible in the darkness, the Mariana waters churned, and somewhere beneath those waves, in tunnels that were filling with water on a tidal clock, 381 people were running out of time. I turned east, toward the old subpen, and started dropping sonobuoys in a search pattern. Then I keyed the legacy emergency frequency and broadcast into the storm. Any station, this is Viper 748 conducting emergency SAR operations. I have acoustic evidence of survivors in the Anderson subpen complex, requesting immediate support. I am operating without authorization. I repeat, without authorization, but I am not operating without cause. The radio crackled, and then, impossibly, a young voice answered, civilian, scared, but steady. Viper 748, this is Kilo Tango 7. I'm a ham operator on the Northern Cliffs. I copy your transmission. What do you need? I smiled for the first time in hours. Kilo Tango 7, I need you to be my voice, because I'm about to prove that sometimes the best censor in the military is a captain who refuses to stop listening. The ocean below me was black as ink, but somewhere in that darkness, people were tapping, and I was going to find them.
Flying at 8,000 feet over black water with stolen sonobuoys and a teenage ham radio operator as my only ally probably wasn't what the Air Force had in mind when they pinned captain's bars on my uniform, but here we are. Kilo Tango 7, I'm dropping buoys in a chevron pattern. I need you to relay any contacts I call out. Can you reach Coast Guard on your equipment? Kiana Torres, I'd learn her full name later, came back with the confidence of someone who'd spent her whole life talking to strangers through static. I can patch to the guard, Viper. My abuelo has connections. What am I telling them? Tell them a crazy Air Force pilot has acoustic evidence of 381 people trapped in flooded tunnels, and if anyone with actual authority wants to help, now would be a good time. I banked hard, lining up my first drop point. The F-16's targeting pod came alive, its infrared sensor painting the ocean surface in shades of gray. I punched the release, and the first sonobuoy tumbled into the darkness below, then the second, then the third, creating a listening triangle that would capture sound from multiple angles. The HUD displayed their positions as they activated, forming an improvised acoustic net. I pulled up the audio feed and routed it through my helmet speakers, layering it over the engine noise and my own ragged breathing. For 30 seconds, nothing but wave action and storm residue. Then, tap, 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 tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. But different now. The rhythm had changed, become more urgent.
I listened harder, forcing my damaged ears to do work they weren't designed for anymore. Tap, 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 tap. 5, 2, 4, 5. OXYG. Oxygen. They were rationing oxygen. Kilo Tango 7, I have solid contact. The pattern's evolved. They're organized down there, running survival protocols. I checked my chronometer. 0552 hours. The demolition was scheduled for 0800. We have 2 hours and 8 minutes. Copy that, Viper. Patching you to someone now. Call sign Rescue 21. A new voice cut in, professional and calm. Viper 748. This is Lieutenant Commander Tasha Whitaker, Coast Guard Rescue Coordination. I'm tracking your position. What's your situation? Finally, someone in the system who might actually listen. Commander, I have acoustic confirmation of trapped personnel in the Anderson Subpen Complex. Tap code communication. They're running oxygen discipline, which means they have leadership and organization. I need rescue assets, and I need someone to call off the demolition scheduled for 0800. Viper, I'm aware of the demolition order. It came with a priority flag from SecDef level. What makes you think you can... Because I'm hearing them, right now, through sonobuoys I should not have, and from a jet I definitely should not be flying. And unless someone with more stars than sense wants to explain to 381 families why we buried their people alive because the paperwork said so, I suggest we start figuring out how to get them out. A pause. Then, Viper, this is going to get you court-martialed. I'm aware. You in or out? Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear her weighing duty against conscience, protocol against the person she saw in the mirror every morning. I'm in. Stand by. I flew a racetrack pattern above the target area, letting the targeting pod map the ocean floor topography while the sonobuoys collected data. Every 90 seconds, the tap pattern repeated, and every 90 seconds, I noticed something else. The acoustic returns showed a harmonic dip in the signal, a pressure shift, like breathing, like the ocean itself was inhaling and exhaling through those tunnels. I keyed the radio. Kilo Tango 7, can you reach Dr. Kihahi Nakoa? I need him on this net. I'll try, Viper. While Kiana worked her magic, my radio crackled with a voice I'd been dreading. Viper 748, this is Anderson Tower. You are ordered to return to base immediately. Acknowledge. Behind that voice, I heard the sharper tone of command authority. Admiral Osei had woken up to find her grounded pilot flying an unauthorized mission. She was probably standing in the tower right now watching my data link and deciding how many different ways she could end my career. Tower, this is Viper 748. Negative on RTB. I have active acoustic contact with trapped personnel. Demolition must be delayed. Viper 748, you are operating without authorization during a declared weather emergency. You will return to base or you will be declared rogue. My hands tightened on the stick. This was the moment. This was where I either backed down and let the system crush 381 people for the sake of operational security and political convenience, or I crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I thought about the tap code, about someone down in that darkness keeping rhythm, keeping hope, trusting that someone somewhere was listening. Tower, Viper 748, I am not rogue. I am conducting emergency search and rescue operations under conditions that justify immediate action. If that violates standing orders, then standing orders are wrong. I will not return to base while people are dying. You want to court-martial me? You'll have to wait until I save them first. Silence on the radio. I just defied a direct order on a frequency that half the Pacific Fleet could monitor. There was no walking this back. Then Keihaki's voice broke through.
Captain Stanton, this is Dr. Nakoa. I'm on Kiana's relay. What did you find? Doctor, I'm seeing a harmonic pattern in the acoustic returns, 90-second intervals, like pressure cycling. Cavitation, he said immediately. The tidal surge is creating pressure differentials. Each wave cycle compresses the air in those pockets. That's why they're rationing oxygen. Every surge makes it harder to breathe. He paused, thinking. But Captain, if we can map those pressure cycles, we can predict when the cavitation will be minimal. That's your ingress window. That's when rescue assets can move. How long is the window? Maybe 20 seconds, 30 if we're lucky. 20 seconds to move rescue divers through flooded tunnels into collapsing caverns while the ocean tried to crush them. That was impossible. Which meant it was exactly the kind of problem the military was supposed to be good at solving. Kilo Tango 7, Rescue 2-1, Dr. Nakoa. I need you to listen very carefully. I'm going to map this corridor using my targeting pod. I'll mark the safe ingress points with my laser. But we need assets at the tunnel mouth right now, and we need someone to convince Admiral Osei that delaying the demo is the only way this doesn't become a war crime. Tasha's voice came back firm. Viper, I have swimmers ready, but we need authorization to access that site.
Then let's make it impossible for them to say no. The pier beside the old sub-pen looked like a staging ground for the apocalypse. Floodlights cupped through the pre-dawn darkness, illuminating Navy EOD teams and their equipment. At the center of it all, Lieutenant Commander Priya Raman stood with her arms crossed, watching demo charges being positioned with the precision of someone who'd spent a career making things explode in exactly the right way. I couldn't see any of this from my cockpit, but Tasha was feeding me real-time updates over the radio net. Viper, I'm at the site. EOD is prepping for the 0800 demolition. They're not happy about you broadcasting survivor claims on an open frequency. Are they happy about burying 381 people? They don't believe anyone's down there. The official line is that all personnel were evacuated before the storm. Tasha lowered her voice. But Stampton, there's a civilian contractor here with 2 micro-AUVs, autonomous underwater vehicles. He keeps looking at the tunnel mouth like he wants to send them in. Something clicked in my head. Put him on. There was shuffling, then a new voice. This is Omar Haddad. Who am I talking to? The pilot who's about to ask you to do something insane. Those AUVs, can they navigate flooded tunnels? That's literally what I designed them for. But I'd need guidance data, collision mapping, and... What if I gave you targeting coordinates from an F-16's pod? Could you slave your vehicles to follow my laser designation? The silence told me he was either thinking or preparing to call me crazy. Theoretically, yes. I'd need to jury-rig a relay, piggyback on your data link. The latency would be terrible and the handshake protocol was never designed for this, but... He trailed off. Wait, you want me to fly overhead and guide my AUVs through the tunnels like remote-controlled toys? That's exactly what I want. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It might also be brilliant. Papers rustled. Give me 10 minutes. And Captain, if this works, I'm never telling another engineer how we pulled this off. They'd revoke my credentials. While Omar worked his magic, I continued mapping the pressure cycles. The pattern was becoming clearer. Every 90 seconds, the harmonic dip lasted for 23 seconds. Not 20, not 30, 23 seconds of reduced cavitation when the ocean took a breath and the tunnels became marginally less lethal. Priya Raman's voice cut into the net. This is Lieutenant Commander Raman, Navy EOD. I'm told we have a rogue pilot making claims about survivors. I'm also told those claims are preventing my demolition from proceeding on schedule. Would someone like to explain why I shouldn't just ignore all of this and do my job? Tasha jumped in. Commander, the acoustic data is solid. Dr. Nakoa has verified the tap code patterns. We have at least hundreds of people down there. Or we have structural resonance that sounds like tap code to people who want to hear it. I've seen this before. Hurricane Maria, the Caribbean. We delayed a critical infrastructure collapse because someone heard voices. When we finally went in, it was just water hammer in the pipes. Priya's voice wasn't cruel, just tired. I'm not burying anyone, but I'm also not risking rescue teams on ghost signals. Then let me prove it, I said. Omar's AUVs. Send them in with my guidance. If they find nothing, I land this jet and turn myself in. But if they find survivors, you delay the demo and we extract every single person. And if the tunnels collapse while the AUVs are inside, then you're out 2 experimental robots. But Commander, I flew combat in Syria. I dropped ordnance on buildings where the intel said militants were hiding. Sometimes I was right. Once I was wrong, or almost wrong. I refused the strike because the math didn't track. Saved 17 civilians. I paused. The math doesn't track here either. The demolition order came too fast. The evacuation timeline doesn't match the storm's progression. Someone decided it was easier to bury a problem than solve it. Priya was quiet for a moment. Then, Omar, are your toys ready? 2 minutes, Omar said. I've got the handshake protocol locked. This is going to be ugly, but it should work. Then do it. But Stanton, if those AUVs find empty tunnels, I'm going to personally fly to wherever they lock you up and testify against you. Fair enough. The next 2 minutes felt like 2 hours. I maintained my orbit, watching the targeting pod feed, waiting for Omar's signal. The ocean below me was turning from black to dark gray as dawn approached. Somewhere in Washington, people were probably waking up to reports of an insubordinate captain and an unauthorized rescue operation. I'd be famous by noon, either as a hero or a cautionary tale. Viper, this is Omar. We're live. AUV-1 and AUV-2 are in the water. I'm slaving them to your laser designation. Light them up. I adjusted the targeting pod, found the tunnel entrance, and painted it with the laser. On my display, 2 small contacts appeared. Omar's AUVs, responding to my signal like fish following a lure. Contact, I have them, moving to waypoint Alpha. The AUVs dove, their cameras feeding data back through Omar's relay to my cockpit display. It was grainy, latency-plagued, and absolutely mesmerizing. I was watching 2 robots swim through a flooded tunnel complex using a targeting system designed for dropping bombs, all while flying a stolen fighter jet in the pre-dawn darkness. If this worked, they'd have to invent a new regulation to ban it. The first tunnel section was clear. Just water, rock, and the skeletal remains of old infrastructure. But then the AUVs turned into a side passage and the camera feed lit up with something impossible. Bodies. Not floating, not dead, standing. They were in an air pocket, water up to their chests clustered around a pipe junction. I counted 11 in the frame, and at the center of it, a man in a shredded wetsuit was tapping on a metal pipe with methodical precision. 5 tap, 3 tap. Omar, are you seeing this? I'm seeing it, recording it. Holy! That's Chief Petty Officer Miguel Alvarez, Priya said, her voice tight. He was leading the SEAL training cadre. I thought he evacuated. Call him, right now. If they have comms gear, call him. Tasha worked her magic. 30 seconds later, a crackling voice came through. This is CPO Alvarez. Who's driving these robots? Chief, this is Captain Riley Stanton, Air Force. I'm the pilot overhead who's been listening to your tap code. How many do you have with you?
Stanton, I have 381 personnel in multiple pockets. We've got injured, we've got foreign observers, and we've got experimental equipment that someone really doesn't want exposed. The water's rising with each tide cycle. We're out of time. 381. Exactly what the tap code had said. I keyed the radio to the command frequency. Anderson Tower, this is Viper 748. I have visual confirmation of survivors, multiple air pockets, 381 personnel. Demolition must be cancelled. Repeat, demolition must be cancelled. Admiral Osei's voice came back, and for the first time, I heard something other than controlled authority. I heard relief. Viper 748, stand by. You've just bought yourself 22 minutes. 22 minutes. In combat, that's an eternity. In rescue operations with tidal pressure cycles and collapsing tunnels, it's barely enough time to think. But it was all Admiral Osei could give me before Washington's demolition order came back online. Priya Raman had transformed from skeptic to believer in the span of 30 seconds. Now she was the one barking orders, repositioning her EOD team from demolition to rescue support. We're not collapsing this tunnel, we're venting it. Shaped charges at the pressure points, timed to the cavitation cycle. We let the ocean breathe out instead of swallowing these people whole. That's never been done, someone protested. Good, then we'll be in the manual. Priya turned to her team. I need charges positioned at the coordinates Captain Stanton marks. Move. I flew lower, dropping to 3,000 feet to get better targeting resolution. The laser designation system painted 3 critical points where the tunnel geometry created pressure traps. These were the places where cavitation was building, where the water wanted to compress air into nothing. Marking point Alpha, north wall, depth markers at 42 feet. EOD divers hit the water, following my laser like it was a divine path, which in a way it was. Divine intervention by way of stolen military hardware and a pilot who'd forgotten how to follow orders. Kayahi's voice crackled through. Captain, the next low tide window opens in 8 minutes. That's when the pressure differential will be minimal. That's when Commander Raman needs to blow those charges. Copy that. Priya, you have 8 minutes to place and wire. Working on it. Then a new voice, one I didn't recognize. This is Handler 3 with K9 unit. We have a dog signaling ordnance at the North Corridor entrance. Live ordnance. We need to reroute the ingress path. I pulled up the AUV feed. Omar had both vehicles mapping the tunnel network now. And sure enough, there was a section we'd missed. Old munitions, unstable after years of moisture and pressure cycling. Rip won't cross it, and if Rip won't cross it, nobody should. Rip. I'd learn later he was a Belgian Malinois who'd saved more lives than most soldiers. Right now, all I knew was that his nose had just complicated our rescue timeline. Omar, can you route around that section? Already plotting it. It adds 90 seconds to the ingress path. Priya, you'll need a 4th shaped charge to vent the alternate corridor. Then I'll place a 4th charge. Someone else said, Commander, that's too close to the instability zone. If it shifts, then it shifts, but these people are getting out. Priya's voice carried the weight of someone who'd made peace with risk a long time ago. Timer set, 6 minutes. I watched the divers work, their lights cutting through murky water like stars in a poisoned sky. They moved with practiced precision, placing charges that would crack rock just enough to let pressure escape without letting the whole structure collapse. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was everything the military was supposed to be when it actually worked. On the ground, or rather on the pier, a crowd had gathered. Tasha Whitaker and her Coast Guard swimmers stood ready. Civilian emergency services, media. I could see camera lights now, dawn breaking over the chaos. One figure stood apart from the others, recording everything on a professional rig. Ben Cruz, local investigative reporter who'd covered Guam for 15 years. His camera was pointed at the tunnel mouth, at the rescue unfolding, at the evidence that someone in Washington had nearly buried a story, along with 381 people. 4 minutes, Kayahi announced. I tightened my orbit, watching the timing. The cavitation pattern was building towards its 90-second low point. Everything had to sync. The charges, the tide, the rescue swimmers, the AUVs mapping the safe corridor. 3 minutes. Priya surfaced, giving the thumbs up. All charges placed. Now it was just timing and prayer. 2 minutes. Captain Stanton, I need you to call the countdown. You're the only one who can see the whole picture. I was the only one. Not because I had better sensors or superior training, but because I'd refused to stop listening when everyone else had decided silence was easier. 90 seconds. Rescue swimmers, stand by. Tasha's voice came back calm. Standing by. 60 seconds. Priya, arm your charges. Armed, firing on your mark. 30 seconds. I watched the harmonic return on my display. Watched the pressure differential start its slide towards the brief window of survivability. 15 seconds. Final check. All assets report. Omar, AUVs in position. Tasha, swimmers ready. Priya, charges hot. 10, 9, 8. The ocean held its breath. 3, 2, 1. Execute. The charges detonated with precision, not the catastrophic violence of demolition, but the surgical crack of rock being convinced to split along carefully calculated planes. Water erupted from the tunnel mouth, venting pressure like a steam release. The harmonic pattern on my display shifted, stabilized. The corridor was open.
Go, I called. Swimmers are go. Tasha and her team hit the water, following the path Omar's AUVs had mapped, following the laser points I'd painted, following the timing that Kiahi had calculated. They disappeared into the tunnel mouth with 47 seconds of low-pressure window remaining. All I could do was fly circles and wait. The first survivors broke surface at 0644 hours. I watched through the targeting pod as Coast Guard swimmers guided them up, one by one, bodies draped in thermal blankets, faces pale but alive. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt the slow, cold dread of bureaucratic revenge preparing to strike. Viper 748, this is Anderson Tower. You were ordered to land immediately. Security teams are standing by. Not return to base, not good work, just the clinical language of someone about to be arrested. Copy Tower, RTB in 5 mics. But before I turned toward the airfield, I activated the civilian action camera I'd taped to my glove. It was pointed at my face, at the HUD, at everything that made this moment real. My name is Captain Riley Stanton, I said into the camera. At 0530 hours today, I commandeered an F-16B without authorization to conduct search and rescue operations in the Anderson Sub-Pen Complex. I did this because I had acoustic evidence of 381 trapped personnel. And I did this after my formal SAR request was denied due to demolition orders that prioritized operational security over human life. I let that sit for a moment, making sure the camera caught everything, my face, my voice, the coordinates on the HUD, the timestamp that proved when all of this happened. I'm not a hero. I'm a pilot who listened when I was supposed to stop listening. And if that's a crime, then the system that makes it a crime is broken. I switched off the camera, downloaded the file to my tablet, and transmitted it in a data burst to 3 places: Kiana Torres, Ben Cruz, and a secure drop site that June Park had quietly shared with me days earlier. Then I turned the Viper toward home and prepared to face whatever came next. Landing was smooth. Taxiing back to the flight line, less so. Security Forces vehicles flanked me the moment I shut down the engine. Master Sergeant Delgado stood near the hangar, her face carefully neutral, but I saw the tension in her shoulders. She'd be questioned too, maybe suspended, maybe worse. I climbed down from the cockpit and was immediately surrounded. Captain Stanton, you're ordered to surrender all electronic devices and report to the Provost Marshal. I handed over my tablet, my phone, my backup recorder, but the damage was done. The footage was already spreading. While I was being escorted to a windowless room for the kind of conversation that doesn't appear in official records, Ben Cruz was uploading my GloveCam confession to every news network and social media platform he could reach. By 0800, exactly when the demolition was supposed to have killed 381 people, the story had gone viral. Harold Whitmore, Deputy Secretary of Defense Liaison, probably saw it around 0815. I imagine he choked on his coffee. By 0900, his office was issuing statements. The premature rescue operation compromised sensitive intelligence assets and exposed classified technology to foreign observers. Captain Stanton's actions, while well-intentioned, represent a dangerous precedent that undermines command authority and operational security. But Priya Raman had already released her own statement. EOD analysis confirms munitions detonation risk was substantially overstated. Controlled venting was viable from the onset. The rushed demolition timeline was inconsistent with standard engineering protocols. And Kiahi published a technical brief, complete with data. Cavitation modeling indicates the tunnel complex was stable for an additional 14 to 18 hours under observed conditions. Immediate demolition was not geologically necessary. By 1100, Whitmore was losing the optics war. By 1300, the foreign observer story broke. Yes, there had been Allied military personnel in the tunnels. Bulgarian, Korean, Japanese exchange officers observing joint training. Their presence wasn't classified, it was documented in public exercise schedules. The sensitive technology turned out to be AUVs that Omar Haddad had already published papers about. The whole demolition order was about avoiding embarrassment, not protecting security. I sat in that windowless room watching the institutional machinery grind through its damage control cycles, and I thought about Chief Alvarez tapping his pipe in the darkness. 5 beats, 3 beats. SEALs asking for help. They'd gotten it, but the cost was still being calculated.
Someone knocked on the door. Admiral Osei walked in, alone, her face carved from stone. Captain Stanton, you disobeyed a direct order. Yes, ma'am. You stole military assets. Yes, ma'am. You broadcast on open channels, exposed operational details, and created an international incident. Yes, ma'am. She sat down across from me, and for a moment the stone cracked. You also saved 381 lives, including people I served with, including people whose families will go to sleep tonight knowing their loved ones are coming home. I didn't respond. There wasn't anything to say. Harold Whitmore wants your head on a plate, Osei continued. He's calling this a breakdown in discipline, a dangerous precedent. He's arguing that if every captain can override command decisions based on their personal judgment, we don't have a military, we have a mob. Is he wrong? No, he's not wrong. She leaned back, but he's also not right. Because sometimes the system fails, Riley. Sometimes the people at the top make decisions based on politics instead of reality. And when that happens, we need people who refuse to pretend the math adds up. She stood. You're grounded pending inquiry. All flight privileges suspended. There will be an Article 32 hearing. The outcome is uncertain. I understand. But Riley, she paused at the door. Those 381 people are filing statements on your behalf. Every single one. Even the ones who can barely breathe are dictating testimony. So whatever happens, you won't face it alone. She left. I sat in the windowless room and waited for whatever came next, knowing that I'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But somewhere in the Pacific, 381 people were breathing air that should have been sealed under 1 million tons of collapsed rock, and that had to count for something. I was grounded, detained, and probably finished as a pilot, but nobody had taken away my radio. From that windowless room, I could still hear the rescue net. Tasha Whitaker's voice cut through the chatter, steady as bedrock. Rescue 2-1 to all swimmers. We have 17 more personnel in the deep pocket. Accessing now. I closed my eyes and listened. building the picture in my head from fragments of radio traffic and the acoustic training that had defined my career. I might not be in the cockpit anymore, but I could still guide them. Tasha, this is Stanton. You're approaching the pressure transition zone. Next cavitation pulse in 43 seconds. There was a pause, then, "Copy, Stanton. Thought they locked you up." They did. They just forgot to take the radio. You'll hit the choke point in 20 seconds. Surface water will be calm, but the subsurface current is cycling. Wait for the pulse to pass before you commit. Roger that. Standing by. I checked the chronometer I'd scratched into the table with a pen. Old school timing because they'd confiscated everything electronic. The cavitation pattern was in my bones now, a rhythm as familiar as my own heartbeat. 30 seconds. 25. Kiahi's voice joined the net. "Captain Stanton is correct. I'm seeing the pressure differential build on the remaining sensors. Wait for the release." 20 seconds. Outside, dawn had fully broken. Through the tiny window in the door, I could see personnel moving with purpose. The base had transformed from rescue operations to recovery operations, and somewhere in that chaos, 381 people were counting on a system that almost buried them. 10 seconds. 5, 3, 2, 1. Go now, Tasha. Go. Moving in. The next 2 minutes were silence on my end, imagination filling the gaps. Tasha and her team swimming through flooded passages, following the paths
Omar's AUVs had mapped, trusting the timing that Kiahi and I had calculated. Then, contact. I have visual on survivors. CPO Alvarez is organizing them into extraction order. They're weak but responsive. Relief washed through me like a physical thing. How many can you take this cycle? 8, maybe 10. But Stanton, we have a problem. There's a group of medics and EOD techs separated by a collapsed section. They're in the deepest pocket, water's up to their necks. One more surge and they drown. My mind raced through options. How far is the collapse from your position? Maybe 15 meters, but it's unstable. Rip wouldn't go near it earlier. If Rip, the Malinois, had refused to cross, the explosive risk was real. But so was the risk of waiting. "Priya, are you on this net?" Commander Raman's voice crackled back. "I'm here. And before you ask, yes, I can place one more charge, but the timing will be knife edge. Any miscalculation and we bring the whole section down. Then we don't miscalculate." A new voice interrupted, Admiral Losay apparently monitoring from the command center. "This is ill-advised. We've already extracted the majority. We can—" "No." It was CPO Alvarez, his voice ragged but absolute. "Nobody gets left behind. Not on my watch. Commander Raman, I'll guide you to the placement point. Stanton, you call the timing. Let's finish this." I felt something shift in my chest. This was why I'd flown that jet. This was why I had broken every rule. Because there were people like Alvarez who refused to accept acceptable losses. "Priya, you have 8 minutes before the next major surge. Can you place and clear in that time?" 7 minutes. I need 1 minute buffer for extraction." "Do it." The next 7 minutes rewrote my understanding of human capability. Priya Raman dove into water that could crush her at any moment, placed a shaped charge with hands that must have been shaking, and set a timer that had no margin for error. Alvarez guided her using nothing but voice and pressure sense, his years of underwater operations translating into instructions that kept her alive. And Tasha held position with her swimmers, ready to extract the medics the instant the water cleared.
"Charge placed," Priya called. "Timer set for 4 minutes. Evacuating now." "All personnel, clear the zone," I called. 4 minutes to detonation. But then the ground shifted. Not the major quake we'd been dreading, just a secondary tremor. Barely noticeable on the surface, devastating in the tunnels. "Comms are down," someone shouted. "Lost the relay." My radio went to static. The timing link was severed. And somewhere in those tunnels, a charge was counting down with nobody to coordinate the extraction. I stood up and hammered on the door. "I need outside access, now!" The door opened, not security, but Airman June Park. her face pale but determined. I heard the comms drop. "I've got Kiana on my personal phone. She's been maintaining a backup relay." I grabbed the phone. "Kiana, this is Stanton. Can you reach Tasha?" "I have her. Patchy, but I have her." "Tell her 3 minutes to detonation. Tell her the extraction window opens immediately after the blast, but she'll have maybe 30 seconds before the secondary surge hits. 30 seconds to pull everyone out." "Copy that, Captain." Kiana's voice became the lifeline. I couldn't see the tactical picture anymore, couldn't hear the official nets. But this teenager, with her ham radio and her grandfather's antennas, became the thread that held everything together. 2 minutes. Tasha says she's in position. Good. Tell her to watch for Alvarez's signal. He'll tap twice when they're ready for extraction. 1 minute. She copies. I closed my eyes and counted down in my head, matching the rhythm I'd memorized over hours of listening. The cavitation pattern, the tidal pulse, the timing that separated life from death. 30 seconds. Somewhere beneath Anderson AFB, a shaped charge was preparing to crack rock with surgical precision. 10 seconds. Or it was preparing to collapse everything and bury the people we'd been trying to save. 3, 2, 1. Through the phone, I heard the muffled thump of the explosion. Then Kiana. "Tasha's moving. She has hands on the first medic." "How many?" "She's forming a chain, each swimmer taking a survivor. They're linked together, pulling them out as a unit." A human chain. Literal hands clasped to hands, unwilling to let go, refusing to leave anyone behind. 20 seconds. They need to clear now. Still coming. Tasha won't release until she has everyone. 15 seconds. This was going to be close. Too close. 10 seconds. They're through the choke point. 5, 4, 3. Surface. They're on the surface. All personnel recovered. I sank into the chair, phone still pressed to my ear, and let myself breathe for what felt like hours. June Park was crying. I might have been too. Through Kiana's phone, I heard cheering. Ragged, exhausted, victorious cheering from people who just dragged their teammates back from the edge of the abyss. 381, I whispered. All of them? June nodded. All of them. Outside the window, I could see the sun fully risen now, painting Guam in colors that promised the storm was truly over. But my storm was just beginning. The Article 32 hearing was scheduled for 14 days after the rescue. In that time, I lived in a strange limbo, technically detained but not confined, stripped of duties but not yet court-martialed, famous but not free. Master Sergeant Ro Delgado was suspended pending investigation. They'd questioned her for 6 hours about the accidentally unlocked hangar, the conveniently positioned ground equipment, the maintenance log that had given me cover. She never recanted, never apologized. "I'd do it again," she told the investigators. And that honesty probably cost her any chance of retiring with her full pension. Omar Haddad's AUV system logs were subpoenaed. His employer, a defense contractor that depended on Pentagon goodwill, pressured him to cooperate fully with the inquiry, to distance himself from my unauthorized actions. He refused. Published a technical paper instead, detailing how cross-domain rescue operations could revolutionize SAR methodology. Made it impossible for them to bury the innovation we'd stumbled into. June Park was reassigned, not punished officially, but moved to a different unit, a different shift. The message was clear. Helping me had consequences. But she'd backed up the raw hydrophone feeds to a system archive before anyone could scrub them. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.